In Singapore's pursuit of a greener future, there will be compromises and trade-offs. That's the heads up from Sustainability and the Environment Minister, Grace Fu. In an extensive interview with CNA, the Minister tells Chloe Chu that Singaporeans need to decide on the roles that government, businesses and individuals have to play and their share of the burden of decarbonisation.
We have Sustainability and the Environment Minister, Grace Fu, to share more about what her ministry is doing. Thank you, Minister, for doing this interview.
Thank you so much.
So, first, could you just share a bit more about, the steward pillar that your ministry is heading? What are some constraints or trade-offs or perhaps issues that Singaporeans need to consider when it comes to sustainability?
Chloe, we're really going into a very challenging world. There are many challenges, really fundamental changes out there that will have an impact, long-term impact on the future of Singapore. We're talking about geopolitical tensions. We're talking about countries trying to recover from COVID. And climate change is really one of the major issues that we need to deal with. It has an impact on energy supply. It has an impact on food security and water security. So how do we, this generation of Singaporeans, steward the environment going into the future so that we can leave behind a greener and better future for our future generations? In this process, there are going to be many, many trade-offs. We're talking about, how do we decide how do we want to live? If you look at, in the past, land constraint as an issue, we will decide how much of land is used for economic activity, social activity, for residential, and so on. In the same way, we're looking at how can we look at environment as a constraint now. Carbon abatement, for example, or carbon emissions as a constraint. If we have limited carbon emissions, how do we distribute it between transportation, industry, residential, home, and schools? So this is a conversation that Singaporeans need to get and decide what's the trade-off. We're also looking at what would be the roles of businesses versus individuals versus government. Is it something that individual has no role and leave it to government to decarbonize, or is it going to be entirely on business account? And also we have to think about how much should we do this generation versus in the future. If we do not mitigate, if we do not do the abatement that we need to now, maybe we're leaving behind, a lot of costs of the climate change. Costs such as sea level rise, such as floods, such as damage to properties and lives. So these are the kind of discussions that we need to have. How do we split the pie? Whose roles are these? And also what's to be done now instead of future?
So you talked about the role of individuals. It's been said before that individuals have a very key part to play. But we also understand that, behavioral changes, it takes many years to sort of inculcate this. So what's being done on this end to maybe get those younger generations to really start from an early age?
Well, I think awareness and education is the most important pillar. And MOE is really on board. We're going to do education on sustainability in a very broad-based ways. We are looking at, doing a toolkit for our schools, and also inserting sustainability, environmental science into IHLs and universities and polytechnics. By doing this in a very broad-based manner, we hope that generations of students coming through the system will get the understanding of our impact on climate and also what we can do. But I would say that this is not just something that the young people should champion, because as I said, everyone can have a part, because every one of us is a consumer, is a member of the family. Some of us are leader of a community, leader of businesses, and also decision-making in the public space. So each one of us can, in our way, influence our decisions taken today. So we also like to embed them broadly. So we are really reaching out to, even within the government, business sectors, and also community sectors, to get everybody excited about climate action, because it's not just a burden on us. We see that actually there's lots of opportunities as we transit. So everybody should be participating, agreeing on the process to take, the target to move towards, the pace at which we will move, and then hopefully we get the momentum that we need.
If we're talking about the role of businesses, certain changes, for example, in the built environment sector, it's infrastructural changes. What are some issues on this end, or perhaps what more can be done to sort of help these buildings transit to greener buildings?
You're absolutely right, because a building will stay with us for a few decades. And if we built it right today, it can actually set the platform for us for a sustainable future. So a building that has, very efficient way of managing energy is designed so that we can, harness the wind that can cool down the environment. It is built with, say, recycling facilities that will really be very helpful as we move the entire population towards a more sustainable future. So we want to really focus on the built environment in two ways. First of all, it's really, what do we do with the building now? Can we make the air conditioning, for example, the chiller, a lot more energy efficient so that it's the same space but requiring less electricity? And with the electricity utility prices high at this moment, we hope that businesses will think about ways to reduce the need of electricity. So government has schemes, NEA, EDB, to encourage businesses to adopt more energy efficient equipment. The other area is really how do we incentivize business owners, building owners, real estate developers to also adopt greener way of construction. And I think this working, with BCA and MND, we have schemes to, for example, encourage building owners to do significant retrofitting. They put in more energy efficient buildings, features. And also we want to see how we can look at, green construction better. So I think exciting news is development is coming up in the BCA side to really move towards greener construction.
If we're talking about different roles people play for climate, in terms of combating climate change, is there any sort of demographic or maybe groups of people that have been a little bit more challenging to reach out to? What is your ministry doing on this end?
Well, generally speaking, like all current affairs issues, more educated people where they access news and information more readily and more frequently tend to get the message faster. So we have to reach out to, really all segments of the population, including those who perhaps don't access information as broadly as possible. So it's really going into the community and really spreading the message. I must say that, when we look at the awareness, perhaps the younger generation has greater awareness about sustainability and environmental protection. The older generation may not understand what sustainability development is all about and what climate change is about, but I must say that they have very frugal lifestyles, which is very sustainable lifestyles. They tend to not use a lot of electrical appliances. They tend to, reuse their things many times over. So I think in terms of mindset, they are not far away in terms of sustainable lifestyles, but really it's about, educating them on what can be recycled, for example. And as we implement more and more initiatives out there, we need to reach out to them and to let them understand that, these are all the changes. We need you to bring your reusable bags. We need you to, for example, recycle your beverage containers. So it's about really going out to the community. And this is where I think the younger generation can play a role. We are very excited to see many younger groups, whether it's NGO or schools, organizing themselves to go out to the community to spread this message about recycling, about community gardening, about composting. So many interest sort of groups championing their causes and reaching out to the neighborhood. And that's really what we like to see as we really bring the entire population towards a more sustainable future.
So, as we come out of the pandemic and as Singapore continues to recover from it, I understand that the pandemic might have caused some delays in terms of maybe 30 by 30. Some of the local farms are still trying to catch up to speed because of the supply chain delays back then. Would you say that our goal has sort of shifted, or will there be delays on this end?
Absolutely. COVID has impacted us because even though we tried as much as possible to advance our 30 by 30, but we suffered supply chain disruptions with building materials and so on. So we have a 1 to 2 years delay. But what the pandemic has also taught us is the importance of food security. And we have seen through the various disruptions in food supply that the population actually is gaining awareness about the importance of food security. In fact, in our Forward SG or Forward Singapore exercise, when we started to have polls, food supply security has sort of emerged as a top issue that Singaporeans are aware and concerned with. So it is awareness and also acceptance that we need to have some local production capability. And with that, we hope that there will be greater acceptance on the demand side, on the consumer side, when our farms are ready. Our farms are going to be ready over the next few months. So I hope that Singaporeans will really go into the shopping supermarket and load up their shopping bag with local produce.
I think two very important lessons came out of the pandemic. One of it is definitely food security, and the other one was the whole idea of reskilling and staying relevant. So how do we sort of ensure that, with so many new green skills emerging, how do we make sure that nobody's left behind? There might be people who are reskilling, but still perhaps facing some challenges in terms of keeping up with the sustainability goals.
Well, a lot of the move or shifts that we're looking for, it's really in an adjacent industry. For example, if you look at petrochemicals, it is a major emitter, and obviously we need to do something to look at decarbonizing that sector. But as they move into more sustainable chemical, for example, it is the same skill sets in terms of processing, process engineering, chemical engineering. So it's really adjacent skill sets, except that they have to look at slightly different products. They have to look at, increasing process and so on. So we're hoping that as we move the industry will also help to retrain their staff with the necessary skill sets. Also, in many other areas, sustainability actually involves a lot of engineering skills. So as we sort of decarbonize our transportation sector, we're going to move into EV. Some of the skill sets with mechanics and technicians are actually much needed in the building sector, for example. How do we decarbonize a building? How do we manage air conditioning better? And lots of sort of engineering jobs that's going to be emerging. And we hope that Singaporeans will basically look for similar skill sets, but applying it in the green sector. We think that it's going to give us net plus, because it's not just the manufacturing sector that's going to be affected. Services sector, there are going to be a lot more jobs out there for auditing, for reporting, carbon services, banking, legal, that needed to implement sustainable projects. So if you're talking about green finance, for example, there will be many, many jobs created to support this sector. So the new graduates, we hope that through educating them, putting the modules in the IHLs, they will pick up the necessary skills to move. And it is really a major training exercise, if you like. Sustainability, it cuts across all sectors, and we hope that different sectors, whether you are in chemicals or in food or whether you're in manufacturing, different trade associations will run the courses to train their members to pick up the new skills on sustainability.
I mean, there are many different initiatives that your ministry is doing at the moment that cuts across various groups of people. What would you say is the biggest sort of obstacle standing in Singapore's way of achieving its sustainability goals for now?
It's very hard-pressed to just name one obstacle, because we do have multiple obstacles. But if I were to say, if to pick one, it's really because of our land constraint. Because our small size, we are renewable energy constrained. So many of the decarbonization options that other countries, other societies have, we actually do not have. So for example, solar, we are limited in terms of the land area for solar deployment. Also, wind energy is not available. We don't have major rivers for hydro. So actually, we have to work very, very hard to decarbonize, including, importing renewable energy. And it's really hard work. But we have, seen from our past history that water, for example, was a key strategic issue for us, for our survival, for our independence, for our sovereignty. And even though we lack fresh water, we lack a reservoir to contain the water, but through decades of investing in innovation and really relentless devotion into improving technology as we go, we now have our new water and we have desalination water. Are we happy with what we have now? No, not yet, because we know that it's energy intensive, these processes. So the next thing that we want to do is really to try to decarbonize the new water, the recycling of water, and also desalination. And again, new targets are being set, and then we will work on to reduce our energy intake. And that will be the spirit that we need in Singapore. We will identify what's of priority now, achieve that to secure our food, water, energy supply, and then work towards, reducing the footprint as we go. So to 2050, 3 decades ahead of us, we have lots to do, but I believe that with our long-term execution, with our investments in R&D, with our ability to bring IHL's Skills Future training to our people, we will reach our goal.